The movie starts in 2004, showing Arika trying to get in touch with her husband Sanjay. She calls his friends and colleagues because Sanjay hasn't come home since the previous night. She finds out from his office that he hasn't been to work for 2 days. His friends last saw him 3 or 4 days ago. And now, she's at the police station filing a missing person report for her husband Sanjay. While she waits, a couple enters and complains about their housekeeper. They say that their Rolex watch has been stolen. Their child, who was sitting nearby, seems scared and keeps looking away. The police officer, Aravind, approaches the child and takes them to a room. He gently asks the child about the watch, and the child confesses that it broke in their hands. They had hidden it out of fear, but couldn't tell their parents. Aravind talks to the parents, explaining that they're too focused on material things and are missing out on giving their child the love and attention they truly need. He reminds his junior officer that before registering any complaint, it's important to observe everything around, because sometimes the truth is right in front of us, but we need to look closely to recognize it. Arika then shares her concern with the officer that Sanjay has been missing since the previous night and his friends last saw him 2 days ago. A missing report is filed with Sanjay's photo. Now the story moves to the present day. Arika is celebrating her daughter Nidhi's birthday, and Nidhi is celebrating her mother's birthday too. Nidhi gives her mom a makeup kit mirror as a gift, which upsets Arika. Nidhi asks her why she seems so worried and why she never celebrates her own birthday. Arika responds that she gets reminded of some old memories on her birthday and avoids celebrating it because of that. Nidhi gets upset and wants her mother to open up and tell her what's bothering her. But Arika keeps everything to herself. So Nidhi calls her grandfather and asks him to give her the file related to her father's missing report, as she wants to read it. Her grandfather hesitates, warning her that some things might disturb her, but after Nidhi insists, he sends the file. Nidhi starts reading the file, which begins with Chapter 1, titled Missing Pieces. This is where we see the full story of Sanjay's disappearance in 2004. In the report, Officer Aravind starts by questioning Arika, then goes to ask Sanjay's parents a lot of things. It becomes clear that they don't like Arika at all. They were never happy about the marriage, and they even suggest that Arika trapped Sanjay into marriage because she got pregnant before they were married, which forced him to marry her even though he didn't want to. They also mentioned that Sanjay didn't really like Arika either. The main reason was that Arika had pushed his parents away from him. And for a guy who had never even lifted a coffee mug, now he had to do all the household chores. It didn't help that every 2 or 3 days Arika would fake being sick. Officer Aravind listens carefully to everything, taking in both the good and bad details. There was one person though who could provide more information, the housekeeper. But the housekeeper didn't like Arika much either. Arika would complain about every little thing, like where the clothes should or shouldn't be placed. If even an inch was off, she would scold the housekeeper. Personally, I don't think that's such a bad thing. When you pay someone, you expect them to do the job the way you want, and that's fair. However, what's clear is that there were a lot of arguments between Arika and Sanjay, but they always tried to present themselves as a happy couple to the outside world. The reality is that they weren't very happy in their bedroom. Then Sanjay's mom shares that Arika had humiliated him in many ways. For example, when she was pregnant, she went out on a scooter, had an accident, and claimed she miscarried. After that, she became infertile, meaning she could never have children again. At the same time, Aravind continues talking to Arika. One day, while speaking to her, he steps aside to discuss something with a constable. He notices Arika nervously tapping her fingers on the chair, which he files away in his mind. Then, suddenly, Aravind asks her if Sanjay had any affairs. Arika gets angry and asks why he's asking such questions. She goes on to tell him that when she was in school, she instantly liked Sanjay. They dated and eventually they got married. She also mentions that on her birthday, which was May 22nd, they were very happy together. But then they had an argument and Sanjay stormed out. He even had a fight with Siddharth, the MD of his office. It even got physical, and because of that, Sanjay was thinking about quitting his job. On that same day, Sanjay had given Arika a heart-shaped mirror as a gift. So when Nidhi gave Arika a heart-shaped mirror, it brought back all those memories. It turns out Sanjay loved Arika a lot, more than she had ever received love from her own mother. And the support she never got from her father, Sanjay gave her that too. After that, Aravind goes to Sanjay's office and speaks with Siddharth. They discuss Sanjay's disappearance and Siddharth mentions that Sanjay had epilepsy, which could explain his issues. When Sanjay went missing, Siddharth was elsewhere, but Aravind wants to know everything that happened that day and who talked to who. He tells Siddharth that if needed, he may have to come to the police station. With that, Aravind leaves the office. Now chapter 2 begins, titled Lost and Found. In this chapter, we see a body discovered in a side area and it's immediately examined by forensic experts. The body's throat has been slit and because of that, all the blood has drained out and the body has started to decompose. Then we see Officer Aravind, who arrives at the police station and receives the initial report about the body. Right then, he gets a call from the SP's office, pressuring him to solve the case quickly because the media has already gotten wind of it. After that, Aravind calls Arika to the police station again and says harshly, "You don't seem like an innocent wife to me." He tells her that she is now the prime suspect in this case because the body found 3 days ago belongs to no one else but Sanjay. This means Sanjay is dead and the body was found beneath the house's basement. Arika is shaken by this information. Aravind asks Arika for more details and she begins telling her story. She says that since that night she's been alone at home, feeling very sad and depressed. She couldn't stop thinking about Sanjay and crying because of the loneliness. To distract herself, she decided to clean the entire house. Then one day she noticed a terrible smell. She checked around the house to see if any animals had died, and then she went to the basement, where she found Sanjay's body inside an old box of toys. She was devastated, realizing that she had gone to file the missing person report when she already knew her husband was dead. Aravind asks her if Sanjay had gone out that night, how did the body end up here? Arika replies that she also went out in anger that day. This was the first time she had said this, and it surprised Aravind. She continues, saying that Sanjay used to go out whenever they argue, and that day was no different. She also went out, driving her car sometime around 7:30 or 8 p.m. But she had a minor accident with a cap-wearing man on the road, which made her nervous. Afterwards, she went to the hospital and stayed there for a while before returning home, but Sanjay never came back. Aravind then asks, "But the house was unlocked. It should have been locked, right? If someone else opened it, how did they get the key?" This is when Arika reveals another shock: she is 4 months pregnant. Aravind reminds her that she was supposed to be infertile, to which Arika says this pregnancy is a miracle that happened to her. Hearing this from her, Aravind grows suspicious, as saying something like this to a police officer sounds odd. He then asks Arika if she saw the taxi number where the accident occurred or if she remembers anything else from that night. But Arika doesn't remember anything. Frustrated, she gets angry. But Aravind tells her to think calmly about the spot where the accident happened and try to recall any details like the taxi number. After some thinking, she gives him some details about the taxi. She then wants to go home, asking for Sanjay's belongings, like his watch, wallet, and glasses, because those are the only things that remind her of him. She even says she regrets not cleaning his glasses that day, which makes her feel guilty. At the beginning of the movie, we see Nidhi constantly cleaning her glasses, and Arika keeps asking her to do so, which makes Nidhi feel disturbed. Nidhi feels that Arika's habit of disturbing her has always been there. But the truth is, Arika has been suffering from a painful memory for a long time. Arika always cleans Sanjay's glasses, and if she had cleaned them that day, maybe Sanjay would still be with her. Arika didn't realize this until it was too late. However, the constable informs them that there were no glasses found with Sanjay's body. Arika insists that Sanjay was wearing glasses that day. In the next scene, we see Siddharth at the police station. He is now the second prime suspect because Sanjay's fingerprints and glasses were found in Siddharth's car. Aravind asks Siddharth about that night, but Siddharth denies everything, saying nothing truthful. Later, his wife arrives at the station as well. Aravind then calls in Siddharth's assistant. Aravind points out that every crime has two sides. One is strong like Siddharth's, and the other is weaker like his assistant's. He believes he can get the truth from the assistant. But Aravind doesn't have to go far, because Siddharth's assistant himself admits that he and Siddharth are in love with each other. They were together that night, but some people caught them, and that's when Sanjay arrived and saved them, taking them to the hospital. Afterward, they assume Sanjay went home. Sanjay's fingerprints and glasses were found in Siddharth's car because they went to the hospital in it. Siddharth's wife, in a moment of disbelief, asks him, "How could you do this to me?" and starts crying. Then a man named Matthew comes to meet Aravind and tells him that this case is not a murder. 2 phone calls were made. The second one was from Sanjay's lover, Akira, the woman Sanjay wanted to marry. Aravind asks, what does Akira have to do with this case? It turns out that this relationship was much deeper than anyone thought. It was a blood relation. Akira and Arika are twin sisters, so Akira and Sanjay were killed by none other than the psychotic Arika herself. Aravind is shocked by this revelation, and Nidhi, who overhears the conversation, is equally stunned. Meanwhile, Nidhi has lunch with her mother and asks her, has there ever been a time when you were so angry with someone that you wanted to kill them? Arika answers, saying that when she was a child, she had a very close friend whom everyone else seemed to love more than her. She was jealous of this friend because they always received more attention, and Arika felt overlooked. She was so angry at her friend that she wished she could kill her. However, that was just a childhood memory. Arika assures her mother that she never wished harm on anyone again, and she never hurt anyone. Today, ironically, she is the one suffering. The third chapter begins, titled Truth or Dare. Aravind questions Matthew about Akira. Matthew recalls that he had first noticed Akira at a party when she was playing the guitar. He was immediately attracted to her, and Akira performed songs for him. They had a lot in common and spent a lot of time together, eventually falling for each other. But when Arika is asked about it, she denies knowing anyone named Akira. She recalls a time when Matthew followed her in the market and kept asking about Akira, but she insists, I don't know any Akira. She never had a sister. Matthew reveals that he wanted to marry Akira, but Arika opposed it. She had been controlling Akira's life, making all the decisions for her. Matthew explains that Akira had even tried to run away, but Arika forcefully brought her back and locked her up. Matthew also mentions that Akira, feeling bored with always using the same identity, used to go to different places under different names. She stayed in various hotels using various aliases. The hotel records show that Matthew had entries under different names, but they were all Akira. Aravind, frustrated, asks where Akira has been all this time, as they had been searching for her. Matthew, puzzled and concerned, shares that he couldn't find her. But then he hears the news that Sanjay has died. From this, Matthew starts to believe that Arika might have killed both Sanjay and Akira. When Aravind asks Matthew where he was on the night of the incident, he says he was home, intoxicated. After talking to Matthew, Aravind speaks with the constable, who mentions that they still have no updates about the taxi driver involved in the case. The post-mortem report for Sanjay has arrived. Aravind informs Arika that Sanjay's throat was cut, likely between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., and many fingerprints were found, but no clear evidence. However, the key to his house was found in his pocket, meaning he had gone home alone, but someone was with him. They also found fake hair in his wallet. Aravind asks Arika, do you ever use fake hair? She replies, maybe it's from a doll. Aravind senses that something is off. He hints that cheating often happens in relationships where people feel lonely, and Arika insists that Sanjay was not like that. Aravind then shifts the topic to Akira, revealing that Akira had been involved with Matthew while she was still with Sanjay. This causes Arika to become very angry. She denies everything, claiming she was never involved with Akira. She insists that no one can prove she was Akira, and Aravind promises that the truth will come out. Arika then opens up and admits that after Sanjay's death, she no longer had any desire to live. She was broken, but she has a child growing inside her, and that is the only reason she is still alive. She says that if it is proven that she is guilty, she will punish herself. The constable later confirms to Aravind that Arika had indeed been in the hospital that night. The taxi driver involved has also been located, and he verifies the story. In fact, the driver identifies Arika as the person he had seen that night. Matthew shows up again and says he can prove that Arika and Akira were not the same person. This makes Aravind and the constable pause, as Matthew seems adamant, suggesting that Arika is hiding something. Aravind begins to believe that Arika might be hiding something, but it doesn't mean Matthew's claims are entirely false. Then Matthew shows them the guitar, which had extra strings that Akira had kept professionally. Aravind had done a background check and discovered that Arika was an only child. At first, Arika denies it, but later, she admits that she was Akira. Aravind warns Matthew to stop interfering and says that everything they have learned so far points to Arika's involvement. There are still many mysteries to uncover, and it will take time. For now, Matthew should stop disturbing them. Chapter 4: Hide and Seek. It is now clear that Arika was Akira. She had adopted Akira's persona to escape her own loneliness and despair. Aravind learns from Siddharth that Sanjay had borrowed 5 lakh rupees from a company for a client, but the money never reached the client. Aravind goes to Arika's house to inquire about the money. Arika says that Sanjay had brought the money home and kept it under the TV, but when he returned from the hospital that day, the money was gone. Aravind begins to investigate further and recalls that on May 29th, a magazine was found in Arika's room. Since it was a weekly magazine, it must have arrived on the 22nd. Aravind talks to the courier man, who remembers delivering a parcel to Arika's house around 8:30 p.m. The courier man identifies her by the voice as she had called him by name when she asked him to leave the parcel inside. Aravind begins to connect the dots. It seems like two minds were at work here, one strong belonging to Arika and another weaker one, which he still needs to uncover. Arika is subjected to a lie detector test, where she answers questions about Sanjay's murder. She denies killing him and also denies having a twin sister. All her answers are true, except for one. The lie detector indicates that Arika is Akira. Aravind then questions Arika again, asking her, "Are you Akira?" This time she admits that she is. She also confesses that it was Arika who killed Sanjay. Meanwhile, Nidhi gets worried when she finds incomplete files. She calls her grandfather and tells him that Matthew had been talking about Akira's child and that Arika had killed both Sanjay and Akira. Nidhi starts to suspect that the person she's been living with might not be Arika but actually Akira. To test her, Nidhi convinces Arika to play the guitar for her, saying her friend really wants to hear it. Though Arika initially hesitates, she eventually plays the guitar, and Nidhi becomes sure that Arika is Akira. Nidhi starts accusing her mother of being a murderer. Arika, in great distress, confesses everything in front of her daughter. She begins telling the rest of the story that she had previously shared with Aravind. Chapter 5: The Confession. Arika and Akira were twins, but their father always wanted a son, so he tried to get rid of Akira by giving her to a nurse. However, the nurse decided to keep Akira and raised her in secret, away from the world. The nurse taught Akira how to study and play the guitar. One day, Akira saw her birth date on TV and decided to meet her biological family. Arika's parents, feeling guilty, eventually accepted Akira. The two girls lived together but kept their identities separate. They maintained a diary to make sure they behaved the same way. Everything seemed fine until Arika fell in love with Sanjay. They got married, but marriage troubles soon followed. Meanwhile, Akira had been abandoned by Arika, and it was at a club that Sanjay met Akira, believing she was someone else. They began an affair, and Akira got pregnant. One night, Arika was at home but dressed and styled like Akira. She knew everything and, in a fit of rage, killed Sanjay. Akira, trying to save her sister, hid Sanjay's body in the basement. At first, it seems like the case is solved, but there's more. During his investigation, Aravind learns that the nurse who raised Akira is dead, and no one recalls her ever having a daughter. Aravind then speaks with a therapist and learns that Akira was not a separate person, but actually just another identity created by Arika. Arika, in her loneliness and pain from being ignored by her parents, created Akira as a second personality. Akira was just a doll, a fictional character, and this is how she justified the murder of Sanjay. The fake hair found on Sanjay's body was from this second identity. After killing Sanjay, Arika erased Akira's persona, thinking that by doing so, Akira would cease to exist, but Akira never really existed to begin with. As the investigation continues, the doctor checks Arika's diary and notices two distinct handwriting styles. The doctor explains that it's common for people with two personalities to have different handwriting styles. This proves just how powerful the mind can be. If one can control it, they can control everything. Even the names were similar, just reversing the letters of Arika gives Akira. In the end, Arika was the original identity, and Akira was a character Arika created to escape her loneliness and pain. Aravind eventually understands the full truth he realizes when Sanjay was killed, and even figures out how Arika was able to create a believable story about the murder. He deduces that Arika killed Sanjay and caused an accident outside to make the story seem credible. She then waited for a few days before reporting the crime to the police. The therapist reveals that when Arika and Akira were hiding together, they would knock on the door with a specific pattern to switch personalities. Aravind had already tested the knocking pattern. The first one was Akira calling for help, and the second one was Arika apologizing and trying to take control again. Since Arika was mentally unstable, Aravind decides to admit her to a mental hospital and closes the case. Arika begins to recover and returns home. However, she's not entirely well yet. She still tells Nidhi stories about Arika and Akira, confusing Nidhi, who believes Arika is Akira and asks for forgiveness. Everything seems to settle down, and it feels like the story has ended. But it's not over yet. One day,
Akira
Nidhi starts writing in her diary and hears knocking at the door. She secretly opens a hidden door and finds Arika outside. This leaves the audience wondering, are Arika and Akira really two different people? Or are they just two personalities of the same person? Could it be that they've been playing a mind game with the therapist too? The film's final twist shows Arika and Akira at a police station where they are there to report a crime committed by Nidhi's grandfather. Yet, from their expressions, it's clear that something is wrong. Their faces reveal they haven't been entirely honest about their past. The ending leaves us with a chilling question: is Arika really cured? Or has she simply been playing along with the mind games? Are Arika and Akira twins, or just two sides of the same person? This mind-bending mystery is left open for the audience to decide. Finally, Aravind is shown receiving a new case. 8 people died simultaneously in different places, all of them found naked. The last person to die was a police officer who had been investigating the case. This new case is even more dangerous than the previous one, and the movie ends on this ominous note, leaving us wondering what will happen next.